You're joining us on Wadawurrung Country in our little office there in Geelong. I'm here with Clancy Mackay. Clancy Mackay, what I like to do when I kick it off, a big part through that Australian Rural Leadership Program and I guess understanding a bit more about Indigenous culture, which we might even touch on a little bit today, is to acknowledge the country we're on. And so we're here on Wadawurrung Country, and their local crew actually have an office just like next door to us here, which is really cool. And one thing I love about the Wadawurrung mob at the footy last year, and I loved it how they did a welcome, but they talked about storytelling, which is obviously a huge part of what we do. And they said that, like, here on this country, but on lands right around Australia, Indigenous Australians have used stories to pass on knowledge, create connection and share wisdom for tens of thousands of years and hundreds of generations. And I'm excited to sit down with you today, mate, and hear a little bit about your story.
See if I can tell a few stories.
And I reckon, well, from what I've heard, you are 27, but I reckon you've lived for a few men already.
Yeah, I had a few battles, that's for sure. So you want us to sort of start from the bottom, sort of where I grew up? And
well, I'd love to know. So we're in Geelong. We don't get to do too many of these episodes face to face. So what brings you down to Southern Australia?
To Marcus, so basically, growing up as a kid, I Robbie and Timmy McGavin, I'd heard a lot of stories about what they were able to do after going to Marcus. And my dad used to be neighbours with Bob McGavin, their father, and they were really good mates. And Robbie and Timmy used to work for my dad off and on. So basically, my old man would tell me how amazing these boys were and what they were able to achieve. And so I always had this idea in my head that Marcus was this amazing place, and if you went there, I'd be able to do great things after going. I never thought that I'd actually go there. And it was the last year I was driving back north to do another year. I was like, I think I was going through Longreach, and I was like late RV, and I just thinking business, like, how am I going to set myself up? I know nothing about accounting or anything like that. How am I going to basically get out of this trend of just working for every dollar? So I messaged them guys, and I feel like an idiot doing it now. I messaged Robbie and Timmy. I said, I hadn't actually seen them for a long time because my old man, when he passed away, Timmy was actually the executor of my dad's will. So we had a fair bit of connection with Robbie and Timmy through that. So I had that connection again. And so I reached out, messaged them. I said, listen, fellas, I really want to sort of start setting myself up. What should I do? I want to learn about business. And straight away, go to Marcus Oldham, mate. You need to go to Marcus Oldham. And I was like, oh, you're an idiot. Bloody Robbie's the chairman of the college for one. And I felt silly, And I was like, geez, do I actually fit that mold? That was because I was just such a wild kid at school and didn't really think that I'd fit in down here. And I was definitely wrong once I got accepted, and I landed an amazing scholarship, the Currawong Scholarship through Dennis and Jill Conway. Like, that was just game changer for me. So once I got down here, and like even after I'm halfway through the second trimester now, I just feel like I've got that much more confidence, and I've got these big ideas for next year. I feel like I could go and attack them now, and I've got enough of knowledge to pull them on, I'm loving that. It's definitely been an eye opener for me. So that's how I've ended up in Geelong, in the cold country.
It is very cold at the moment, and I think what's really cool. Like, I'm a Marcus student, and I think it's an interesting network once you kind of sink your teeth into it. But it's funny, like 7 days is a long time in the world. I think, or it's 10 days ago, you got to speak at the cocktail party for all scholarship recipients. And off the back of that, I had several people reach out to me going, there's this person you need to speak to. They have the most incredible story. They're incredibly humble, haven't talked about it a lot. And then a few days later, up you pop.
It's cool, And I never thought I'd be on a podcast, and there was just a few people talking to me there at that thing, and I was like, geez, like that would be cool to tell my story in depth, and sort of put the spotlight on the industries I've been in, and sort of give them a bit of a rep too, because there's some amazing things out there that no one, like you say, no one talks about, and to shine a light on that would be cool, and glad you give me the opportunity. Yes.
Mate, the microphone's always here. I'd love to know how you're feeling at this point in time.
Not too bad. It feels weird. It's always weird talking about yourself, I feel. So we'll see how we go, but I'll poke through it, and
we'll get there. Now I've got these cards, and they're from another fella that runs a podcast over in the US. It's called the Diary of a CEO Conversation Cards.
Yep.
I want to pull a card at some stage. Do you want to do it
whenever you want? Yeah, whenever
you decide.
We can go one now if you want.
Oh, and we both answer the question?
Yep.
Sounds then you can, we can work out. You'll get to know a little bit about me. I'll get to know a little bit about you. Pick a card, any card.
I feel like a magician.
What does that say?
Do you remember a moment when you realised that you loved your job? And when was the last time you hated your job? That's a good one.
Jeez, what a way to start.
Yeah, so I'm asking you that.
Well, do you want to go first, and then I'll do it as well?
Do you remember a moment when you realised that you loved your job? Well, I've always grown up in the bush, and I guess like my job's always been a different role. You know, like just from either being a contractor or you know, breaking in horses, or when it come to chopper mustering. You know, so I've loved every bit of it, but at the same time, I've always been a gypsy. You know, like I'd stay in one thing and then I'd go on to the next, and I always bounce between. That's what keeps me fresh, is just been the ability to be able to do all these things for certain times in the year, and it keeps my mind racing. But meanwhile, if I've got to fly all year and just muster cattle all year, by the end of the year, I'm really burnt out and worn out. So yeah, I guess I've always loved every bit of it. But yeah, like as you say, if you stay in the one thing too long, you get sour on it. You know, you need change and need to be learning new things and whatnot. So that's what keeps me fresh. When was the last time you hated your job? I've never really hated any of the things I did. I definitely got sour by staying in the one place. I had trouble staying in big companies and whatnot. I just love the idea of being a contractor, and I'm here for 3 months, then I'm over here for 3 months, and I'm meeting all these different people, different styles of working cattle or different breeds of cattle, different country. Like I'm big on just seeing Australia and seeing all the different parts of it. And I definitely flying. I've seen a lot of the Queensland and the Territory. I've been so lucky to tap into that. So hopefully that answers it. Yeah,
a fair bit of mindset on that. Yeah. I'll keep it short and sweet. Last time I remembered I love my job, I reckon, is little moments like this where I think it's you get the chance to sit down with people who, like, even when people have a platform and they might be well known, you get a glimpse into people's lives through, I guess, understanding a little bit more about what has actually shaped them. And so you can go and chat business with people, but if you understand the human behind what they do, I reckon that's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. No, I love our personal and like the connection you can make through this, you know, like you say, so this is a conversation. It's not like we're in some formal meeting or anything. It's good just being able to sit down and talk, I think.
We've tried 3 different locations.
Yeah,
so here we go.
We're on, yeah.
And the last time I hated, I reckon, I think the first thing that comes to me was, it was one of my like early jobs, and I got put in a position. I was sitting alongside my boss at the time, and we were being dishonest in front of a customer, like promising things that we couldn't do.
Yeah.
And that, honestly, like, I ended up resigning from that job that afternoon because I hated that.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Like, just, yeah, so hard. I feel like I'm very honest, and I get uncomfortable if you can't, like you say, can't pull off what you're saying or something. I know what you mean. Yeah.
So, mate, let's chat about. We've got a few photos which I think we'll be able to share with people at different times, and might even, if people are more of a visual watcher, they can check it out on YouTube, and we might try and throw some of the photos in there.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
But I'm fascinated about your story. Tell me, you grew up in the Northern Territory. What's your earliest memory around agriculture?
Yeah, that's a hard one, eh? I grew up on a place called Mount Min Station, which is about 3 hours southeast of Katherine, and my parents had brought it as a bear block. So it used to be part of Mountain Valley, which was owned by Ben Tapp back then, and my parents went through the process of getting it subdivided off, and it was just this bare rough block. You know, it had no fences, nothing. So we wheeled in there in a caravan and picked a good spot, Mohammed, and talked to the Aboriginals there and worked out where it would be above the floodline and whatnot. And they were really good to us there. I got some real fond memories of growing up as a kid and the communities around there, because they used to always come fishing. We had a big Roper River used to run right through our place just down from the house there. And it was unreal barramundi fishing, and so we had a lot to do with them. And I guess so for the first couple of years, we pulled that caravan in there and just set it up on top of the hill, and there was no power, no water, no telephone. And we used to just go down, get a load of water and bring it up from the Roper River or whatever. And that's how we lived for the first few years until we could build a house and get formed there. So I remember growing up rough and just being like, to me, it wasn't rough. It was just normal, but it was just the freedom, like the things we used to do when we were kids there was unbelievable. Like we did school there from Alice Springs, which is think it was like 14 hours away through HF radio. So we'd have times that we had to talk on the HF radio with our teachers and whatnot. So we'd do class from maybe 8 until 11 at the most. So the rest of the day was just freedom, and mum and dad were that busy. So we just run wild, like my brother and I, Jono. Our older brother, Alex, he ended up getting sent away to boarding school down in Alice. So we sort of missed old Ali a bit there in the end. But yeah, we used to just go hunting. That's a lot of the memories I got, is just hunting of little slug guns. We'd just go out and hunt crows and go down to the river, which was right there. And looking back, it's amazing that we didn't get eaten by crocs. Like, we were just, John and I would do the silliest things, down in that river, like fishing and just swimming in little muddy holes off the edge of the water, like just so stupid looking back. But we were bush kids, we were very careful too. Like, we'd see a big muddy hole and billabongs, we loved swimming in them, so we'd get sticks and drag them and make sure there's no crocs and stuff like that. But just stupid, just silly little kids,
Incredibly practical,
Yeah, we love catching snakes, like big olive pythons, like they're big monsters up there. They get sort of, I don't know how big they'd get, well over 3 meters, some of them, and we'd wrestle them, like memories of that, like just stuff like that. Mum was terrified of snakes, and we'd bring these snakes home, and it's funny looking back. We were so wild, and that's sort of what led us to leave the territory after 13 years. We moved down to Gundawindi, and that was because mum and dad, like Jock and Kerry, sort of believed that we needed to be more exposed and get a proper education and be around people. Like, we were sort of the last stop on the end of the road. After us, there were sort of communities and then Roper Bar Store. We just never really seen anyone. And that was, I think, like, we loved it. But, our parents and dad just worked so hard building that place up around us. By the time we left, it was amazing, beautiful gardens. And then we got a house from an abandoned prawn farm. My old man got it on, cut it off the stilts and trucked it all the way there and built it up. And it was amazing, that place, when we left it. It was a hard block, but it was just beautiful. It was home, and always will be. I got so many memories of that place. So,
what did your parents do, like, to lead them down that path?
To lead them there, yeah. Well, my old man, he had done a lot of time in the territory. He was really close with the Fisher family, who I'll talk about later. So he went to boarding school with Alan Fisher, who was sort of his best mate. And so he'd done a couple of years up on a place called Merry River for an old fella who was sort of like a potty dodger. They'd back in those days, like, my old man was born in 1947, so I'm talking sort of in the 60s. They'd spend a lot of time going out with the Aboriginal crew and whatnot, and they'd go out into the neighbours' country and coach a muster. So they would have a little handful of cows, get a little handful of clean skin cows or whatever together. So they might have 40 or 50, and then just go out, track cattle and build a big mob up, and then bring them back to Merry River Station. And they'd do all that on brumbies. It was just all brumbies they were caught. They'd brumbie run, breaking the brumbies. It was wild times, So he had a deep love for the territory. He always wanted to get back there. And his old man, and had left country to the brothers. There was 3 of them, so Jock, Michael, and Ewan, and they all had little pieces of country around Bark Alden and Jericho. Yeah, so Dad had that little place called Mulgrave, and that's when he was neighbours with the McGavins. With Bob and Mum had sort of met the old man. He was a cut horse trainer, and he was a fair bit older than my mother. But that's sort of how Mum had a love for horses, and that's sort of how they got connected. And eventually, it come time, I think it was after when the wool board crashed or whatever it was, they had put down a lot of sheep. So after that, they sort of thought, oh, well, we need a change. And my 2 brothers were on the ground then. They were born in Longreach. That's when they moved to the territory and eventually, seen an opportunity to get Mount McMinn and get it subdivided and pull it on. Like, huge risk and a lot of guts to try and do something like that. My mum would have been, well, she was probably 21 when she had Alex and then Jono. So, she would have been about 27, had 3 little boys and trying to, like, you can see in the photos, they're living really, really hard and trying to pull that on. I just credit to them, it was amazing. And I remember my old man would go away in the wet season because we get flooded in a lot at Mount McMinn during the wet, and we're on that big sand ridge, so it was like an island, and we'd get food flowing into us, through the choppers and whatnot. Dad would be gone for 2 or 3 months to keep the money rolling in, building sheds, building yards. Like, he's really capable of building things. And so that's what would keep the money ticking, was the old man be gone. So we wouldn't see the old fella for ages, it's just funny, just hard times. It was so normal to us, it's just how we went about things, It's good.
Was it around the time that you ended up down in Gundawindi that I guess your perspectives changed, that the way you guys were living up there wasn't how every kid kind of grew up?
Yeah, I definitely had trouble adjusting. I was a wild little fellow, and I fell in with a wild crowd. They weren't a bad crowd; they were good kids and whatnot. But I was just never had a full-time teacher stand up in front of me, and always been told what to do. And I was very independent. Like, we were so independent because we just had so much freedom when we were little. And so I had trouble with that. And I was always in trouble. I'd maybe not real bad trouble until my parents actually split up. So I'll walk you through Gundawindi. I suppose we moved down to Gundawindi, and the plan was to put us kids through school and take it a bit easier. My old man had imported a quarter stallion, which was a duster scamp back in the 71, 72 from America, because he lived over in America and was a cut and horse fella and done rodeoing over there as well. So when we moved to the territory, we were out of that game, because there was no access to that, but we still had all them amazing horses, and Dad continued to breed them. So the plan was to get back to Gundawindi, get more in touch with our horses again, get us boys into school and spend more time with us kids, because our parents just worked so hard. We'd only see them like morning, night, they were gone all day. So that was the plan. Take it a little bit easier. We brought a little 1,000-acre place down there. But when we got there, my parents, same old thing, seeing opportunities, and one of the opportunities was to open a butcher shop up in Gundy, and then which my mother run. And then my old man was built a feedlot on our place called Newstead, and was basically first crossing black-headed Dorper sheep with either merinos or whatever to still get a bit of wool, and then and grain feeding them to basically offer a grain-fed lamb product. And they were selling it all over, all around Australia. And at one point they were selling it even to China through Acton Super Beef. It was a good business, but same thing, just they were working so hard. Mum would drive all the way to town, get up extremely early. Same thing, we weren't seeing much of her, and then we weren't seeing much of Dad. They just work. And it was really dependent on the climate. If it didn't rain, we had some bad droughts while we were at Gundy, and just the business wasn't working, and the stress that it put on them, it sort of split them apart. So when they split up, Mum moved to Lismore and started studying uni again, and she started in a few different things. Got offered, I think it was bioscience, and then got really high marks in that, and then they offered her law, and she's like, "Oh, law, I'll pull that on." Ended up receiving honours in law, and is now a partner in a law firm at Yamba on the coast there. So it was pretty amazing for her to pull that on. At 45, incredible woman, eh? Dad went back to the territory, and Queensland was a contract weaner breaker and contract musterer. So, he was just literally loaded up all his horses in the truck, and we sold that place at Gundy and got out of that sort of with a little bit more, paid the debt off and got a bit in their pockets and whatnot, and was able to go their separate ways. And then I stayed in Gundy with my oldest brother, Alex, who was at that time had done his butcher's trade to run the butcher shop, and same thing, hard working fella, Alex, really. He didn't end up in the bush like Jono and I, but just an extremely hard worker, and whatever he put his mind to could pull it off. I'm always impressed by him. So I just had freedom. I'd been asked to leave boarding school. I actually went a year as the divorce was going on, went to boarding school in Warwick at Scott's PGC, and it was an awesome school, but I was just wild, bluing a little bit and drinking and doing all the things to rebel. I was really just trying to rebel. I was just so upset that my parents were going their several ways, and my two brothers had always sort of left home. Jono was up north. He went to ag college and sort of went away, and I was sort of the only one left. So I was just rebelling hard and hanging out with wild dudes. I was just spent a lot of time suspended. If I wasn't suspended, I was wagging, or when I was there, I was just playing up. So it was just a character, eh? So that was when I was 13, 14, 15. So I'd done a term and a bit in year 10, and then was just having a lot of trouble. I'd moved back to Gundy with Alex then, and I was having a lot of trouble. So I joined this Get Set for Work program, it was called. It was like a GTT course in Gundawindi. And basically they just sent you out on work experience with plumbers. I went plumbing for a while, which was a rare thing.
Just good at talking shit, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So done all these different trades, and then I was obviously having no fun doing that. It was interesting, but not for me. So I got sent up to my mother's parents' place up at Middlemount to do a bit of a work program up there, and I just loved the bush. I'd gone up there branding calves and whatnot a fair bit for them, And my old granny, Rose, she's like, "You got to go to ag college. You got to get something behind you." And I'm glad she said that. And I was like, "Ag college? I don't need to go to bloody ag college. Like, hang around all them rare critters." And
did you like? Because obviously you'd gone through school. Were you bad at school, or you just didn't enjoy that sitting down all day? And
I was just always rebelling. I guess I was the class clown. I guess always the funny guy, and stirring teachers up. And I'd try to a point. Like I'll sound silly, but I was smart. I could keep up with everything. But I guess I hated being told what to do. I just had this rebellious side, and I was trying to basically stir my parents up as much as I could for everything that had happened. Looking back, it's silly, but it's just who I was. I was just
sounds like you're doing a pretty good job of it.
Yeah, I had long hair, had the longest hair, a horrible rat's tail, and I had a spike through my ear at one point, a stretcher through my ear. That's how wild I got. So to look where I am now, I'm just like, who was that guy? But so anyway, I ended up at ag college. That's sort of. And I got sent to ag college, like, this should straighten him out, it's more hands-on and whatnot. And I got there and I thought, there's no chance I'm going to last here. First weekend, got in a big fight with this older kid and went to knuckle, end up in a heap of trouble and whatnot. And I was like, I'm not going to last a month, this place, But anyway, long story short, I met this girl and that sort of got me on the right path. And I started working for a lot of, like, we had family friends and then just different people day working and getting to go out and muster on weekends and earning money. And then I just fell back in love with the bush, and got that real hunger for it again. So I'd done my 2 years at ag college, went back up north with my old man for the first year out, and I'd done a heap of horse breaking with him, and then went wean breaking with him at Brunette Downs, big place on the Barclay there. And which was the best thing I ever did. Me and the old man blued like buggery, but I learned so much off him. Amazing cattleman and horseman, and just like his style of breaking weaners and educating weaners and was crazy. Like, we'd break in 1,200 weaners a day. We'd do 600 in the morning and 600 in the afternoon, educating them. And basically we'd have this system we'd do in the yards to teach them to flow and roll, and all, like, it's a really Pacific system. No dogs, just 2 horses, Dad and I. And then we'd take them outside into a bit of a funny lane, and then we'd just spear them out onto the open paddock. And normally, if it was a good year, there was a heap of feed there. But these weaners were sort of 3 days off mum. We wouldn't touch them, otherwise they were too fresh. I'd spear that lead out of that gate to Dad, and he'd sort of go out, and that they'll be running. These little weaners think, oh, freedom. And my old man would just roll that lead, and it'll be like a big ball. They'll just be sort of spiraling out there. And my job was just to get all the tail out and then come and join him, and we'd have our 600, and then we'd just work opposite each other and basically settle those weaners down, because we had done so much work in the yard, which took us about, I say a lot of work, it was probably 30 minutes at the most, 40 minutes in the yard. When we'd get them out there, we'd settle them down, all of a sudden they'd start to feed, and you'd sort of migrate them for probably 4K or so, let them feed out and whatnot, slowly coach the tail along. And then the trick was, once they were full, was to get them to camp, which is extremely hard. And if you could get that mob to settle down and all start to camp under the trees, you had them. Like, they'd sit down and think about everything you'd just done with them. And when those cattle got up from chewing their cud and whatnot, they were different animals, and we would just march them. Like, we'd have them stretch out for a K. Dad would always be up on the point, and then I'd just make sure the tail was connected and nothing was sort of feeding out in the wings. But you'd just have them just hypnotised, and yeah, just amazing stockman, like what he was able to pull off. And so that sort of set me up for flying later on, which I'll talk about, just a lot of the stuff he taught me with cattle and reading cattle.
What's the trick there? Like, because that doesn't seem like a lot of time at all. And
it's very quick.
And we've got, I guess, like all sorts of listeners, some people who never would have experienced anything like that. Like the closest some people might have come is actually like domesticating a dog and training a dog.
Yeah.
How do you actually build that connection? And what are the tricks that your old man taught you about animal husbandry?
Yeah, it's I guess he just spent a lot of time just like when I was talking about his early days of coaching mustering, like those guys had no helicopters, anything. So if you didn't understand those cattle and were able to read when you had like a big clean skin bulls running into your mob, and if you weren't able to see that mob and understand that fella's like, he's cunning, their mob bulls are so cunning, they slowly work their way out to the edge of the mob. If you weren't smart enough to get cattle around him and cover that old bull, he'd break from the mob. So all of a sudden you've got 1 or 2 men that got to go throw that bull or try and get that bull back in that mob. So you've got to be 10 steps ahead all the time, and that's when it comes in reading cattle. You've got to really know what they're thinking, and they'll tell you everything by the way their ears are, their eyes are, the way they're facing. If their head's up, like pricked up in the mob, you just know that they're thinking about doing something. So you've got to be a step ahead, and that's how them old fellas were so handy. They used to be able to control these mobs, and they didn't have the opportunity of, we'll call the chopper. The chopper can come and bring those 20 weaners back. That never existed, and that's when the stockmen were unbelievable back then. So I guess he brought all that with him, and then he'd just done so much time on thinking about how to educate these weaners in the best way and what he was looking for when it come to like flow and them being able to give it. You can really numb cattle down. So I'm not pointing any fingers at anyone, but if you were to go in there and take some really hard dogs in there and seal your dogs on and chew those cattle and bite them a heap and whatnot, what are you teaching that mob? You're teaching those weaners that nowhere is safe except if they're just crushed up in a little ball, in a little tight ball. And then, righto, so that's all good. You go and try and walk them cattle outside. Those cattle are so scared to break from the mob or even flow and string out from the mob because you've chewed them so much. You try and walk 20k, 30k off those cattle, like you won't be able to do it. You've taught them that they're that scared to break from the mob. So it's all about thinking what and cattle love to string out. When you think about cattle walk in on a pad to go to water, single file and whatnot, water, and then when they go to feed out, they walk out on their little pads. And when they get to the spot they want to feed out, then they spread out and they turn into things. So if you're going to walk mobs in a big blob and whatnot, you're sort of almost saying, feed out, like you let that wing sort of poke out towards you and feed out. You're teaching that mentality. But if you keep them nice and narrow and strung out and thin, you hypnotize them. Like it's in their nature. They're happy to walk out when they're skinny and single file. It's like, so what did he teach me really was just understanding them, and it's the same when I went into the buffalo game. I'll talk about that. It was a whole different ball game that Normie Fisher taught me. And then the crocodiles, it's all instincts. You got to understand how these animals work, and they're predictable because their instincts will tell you. You just got to learn to read them. Everything's about reading them and how they work and how do they operate. Yeah. So I don't know if that really answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. It's fascinating to see you talk about, and you can see I can see by looking at you, like you're visualizing the animals and you can see them there in front of you.
Yeah. It's weird. I get a bit on a tangent all the time when I was talking about cattle and stuff. I just love it.
So while you're up in the territory on this stint, was this where you started to ride broncs and start to rodeo a little bit?
Yeah, so I'd sort of started to get on a few when I was at Ag College. It was a good area, Central Queensland. So that was an Emerald when the Emerald one was open. And I sort of started to get on a few and get the bug a bit, get on saddle bronc horses. So when I went up north with my old man and so that was the first year brunette, done a couple. And then the following year I worked for my brother Jono, who was only 21 and created a contracting team, which is a big thing at 21 to try and have 7 men underneath you and run a show, and a lot of people said to him in the early days, mate, you need more wet saddle blankets, you're too. It wasn't that he was too green, he'd done the time, Jono, but it's just, he's too young, this bloke, he doesn't know what he's doing. And it was very, very ballsy, if I can say that, for him to pull that on. And he's done a really well out of it. He's been going for us 9 years. He's 30 this year. And he always seems to pull it off. And he fences and yard builds as well now. And he's very successful. Him and his partner, Tony, they've done great things. So I love looking at them and seeing what they're up to. And, trying to remember the question. Rodeoing, yeah. So that year, working for Jono, I managed to do quite a few in the Gulf, and got to go to some shows and just got so hungry for it. Got on a couple bareback horses as well. And so the next year was the plan. I sort of got the bug. I ended up going and working for Hewitt Cattle Co. there for a little bit, and I done a lot of rodeos, which was on there. They just brought Pagani at Mara, and we're starting to really get the ball rolling with building their name. So I got to do a lot of rodeos, and I was just saving my chips, and an opportunity come to go to America, just on a 3-month Estevita or whatever. And so I went over there, which was America's where it's at, you can do 5 or 6 in a weekend if you really want to go hard. There's so many, and you don't have to travel. In Australia, you got to travel. You drive 13 hours to some of these shows all the time, and it's just so expensive. You can't really make money of it over here. Over there, it's a career. Those fellas who are in the top 15 in the world, they've made a career out of it, and it's amazing, and they're just the most elite of the elite. So I went over there and went really hard. I spent a bit of time. I landed in Cody, Wyoming, and ended up becoming really good mates with a fellow called Robbie Dawson, and we decided to go up to to Canberra on a bit of a run, done a few rodeos at Cody, and then we went to Canberra and worked in the feedlot and done a few up there. So that was a bunch of fun. And then I must have had about 5 weeks left on my time there before I had my flights home. So we went back to Cody, Wyoming, and went really hard. There was a month left. Cody, Wyoming's a really unique place. It's I think it was one of the first rodeos, but it's 90 days of rodeo. So it starts on the 1st of June, goes right through till the end of August, and has a set of finals. So every single night you can get on broncs.
Every night?
Every night, yeah. It's a full rodeo, and it's like clockwork. It's so well run. It's 2 hours every night. They just run every event. It's an amazing place. And if you're a young fella trying to earn stripes and get on a heap of horses, which is how you get good, you've got to get on a wedge of horses. And just because you don't see much of the ride, it's 8 seconds, but you don't see much of it. It happens so quick, and the adrenaline. So the more you can get on, the more you slow down time and understand what your job is. So yeah, at one point there when we got back there for August, I think it was like 35 days. I got on like 40 something horses. Like sometimes Maury Tate would ask me to get on like a couple a night if they were a bit short on riders. And I was all busted up. My legs were all busted up, like all calcified from getting on so many. And I remember I've got my left arm stomped on by this big swayback mare, and it was all swollen. But I just had this mentality, like I'm just going to ride every night and try and make these finals, and then try and win the average buckle or whatever, and do that. And so yeah, that was a big thing for me, was just going to knuckle over there and just showing that I had guts, and people took notice, and which sort of eventually led me to getting that scholarship to go down into Western Texas College the following year, because I had these connections, and they're like, this guy really wants it, he's got ticker. So that sort of set me up.
Tell me a bit about the scholarship.
Yep. So basically, I landed that one at Snyder, and a lot of good Australian fellas go over to Snyder. The coach there is a fella called Greg Rhodes, and he loves Aussies, so that's a massive thing for us, just having a connection there with Greg. So yeah, it was basically a lot of them schools in the south, and not every college has a rodeo team, but down there it's definitely more common. So basically, they would give you a scholarship, or you'd pay to go to the school, whichever happened. And you'd have to study something, whether it was English or whatever you wanted to do. And we used to all study boilermaking because it'd give us 13 points or something, which was enough points to be on the rodeo team. So we'd all just go boilermaking, and we got along like this. We had a real good instructor when I was there. And so we'd just boilermaking, and he was real lenient on us too. So if we had rodeos we were going to, it wouldn't sort of worry him too much. And yeah, basically you had to practice Tuesdays and Thursdays, I think it was. You'd go to practice. They had their own stock, and the boys would get on bulls, and then the bronc riders would get on broncs. The ropers would rope, vice versa. So we'd practice, and then not every weekend, but every second or third you would have a college rodeo. So you'd go and verse all the colleges in the rodeo teams, and like Greg would pick people who are riding well to represent the college, like pick 2 in each event or whatever. And basically, if you got enough points, I think I never even finished a full season there because my old man got sick. But if you got enough points, like your college got enough points, you go to the finals, and if you won the finals, it's a big deal, big name for the school. And then and they would set your name up to go into the pros. Like a lot of these boys are already riding pro rodeo over there. But yeah, you get that ticket on your thing, winning the college finals, big deal over there. But yeah, so I'd done the college thing for probably nearly 6 months, thinking back. And then my old man got diagnosed with cancer, which was misdiagnosed. It was a real shame. It started off as a little sun cancer in his ear, and they'd cut it out, and they sent it away and said, oh, we got it all and whatnot, but they hadn't. They'd missed the tiniest bit. And it basically got in the nerve and followed the nerve over the top of his brain, and then just spread. And his face actually dropped down, and it was misdiagnosed as Bell's palsy because it blocked a nerve here, so that it dropped down. And Bell's palsy is meant to last for 3 to 6 months at the very most, and this went on for like a year and a half. And he went to all these specialists, and I just don't know how, but they just couldn't pick that cancer up, And by the time they did land it, was up in Darwin. This really good fella, Dad, had gone and seen. He was up in Catherine working, and gone and seen an old doctor that we had when we were in the territory, and he said, I can't diagnose a jock, but I know a bloke that will. I don't believe in coincidence. I think there's something really wrong here, because he's in pain, it's hurting. Bell's palsy is not meant to hurt, he's in pain, all this nerve pain and whatnot. So he's sent to Darwin, and old mate picked it up in 10 minutes, said, mate, you got viral neuro spread or something else called. I'm not exactly sure of what the actual cancer's name was. And anyway, yeah, so this all happened while I was over at college, and getting the phone call from him to say that he'd had that, it rocked me, because I was like, what bloody, because we were like, we didn't really know what it was, but I never thought it'd be that serious, like didn't realize it was so savage. And basically he rang up, said, listen, I bloody, it's all through my brain and whatnot. They're going to try radiation and see what we can do. So he was getting radiation treatment. I said, right, I'll be home, I'll talk to the coach and I'm coming home. He's like, no, mate, bloody stick it out. And I could have stuck it out for 2 or 3 years over there, like on that scholarship, you just get better and better. And I was young enough to stay there for that long. And I had a 5-year sports visa through the college, which is unreal. Anyways, but I was like, bugger that, I've got to get home. And so I ripped home as soon as I could, landed, and I rang my 2 older brothers and I said, geez, we need to get Dad somewhere to pull up, and get him a base. And my old man liked Richmond because it was sort of not far from Jono, where Jono lived. It was only about an hour away from Jono, and it was close enough to Townsville if he needed treatment and whatnot. So we sort of planned on getting a spot there, and I was like, how can I make money really quick using the stuff I know to help the old man out? And I remember when I was working in the Gulf, I had done a bit of work with a fella called Rivers, a bit of a legend up there in the Gulf, flying wise, and I was pretty good mates with old Rivers, and I said, mate, would you and John Logan be, take me on if I went and done my chopper license? And they're like, yeah, 100%. So I ripped through that, done that in 4 months, which is crazy, like really quick. It was 4 and a bit months, and you got 7 exams to pass. But if you fail them, you can eventually get locked out for 3 months, and that's how some of them poor fellas get stuck there for so long trying to get their license. And I was just lucky, had a good run, got my exams done.
Just lucky. Yeah. I just want to jump in there for 2, and it's only a little question, but so you're looking at how you can earn money to help support the old man.
Exactly,
but
yeah.
The chopper license costs a fair fortune as well.
Yeah, HEX debt. So there was a new thing that had just come out through TAFE, and they offered basically they'll pay for your license. You'd have to pay 20% straight up on interest on your license, which is about 20 grand. It cost me about 90 grand. It's a lot of money. And if you done it off your own bat, you could probably do it for 70 or a bit less, if you had no trouble with it. So I done it through HEX.
Yeah, right.
That's which was really lucky for me. Without it, I wouldn't have been able to get it. So that was really lucky doing it through HEX and getting going.
Was it a big motivator too, knowing that, I guess, off the back of you getting that license, that you're able to then earn your keep in quite a quick way? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And just the people I went to work for, Barclay Helicopters, I knew it was a really good company, and I had that job secured. So if I could just do that license and get there, I knew the snowball effect, I'd get rolling and start getting some good money coming through and be able to help the old man out and do all that. So yeah, it was a big motivator just having that in mind, and that's probably why I hooked into it so quickly, because I was just so hungry for it. I really wanted to get it and do that. And yeah, I worked for them for 4 years. Barclay, 4 years. Yeah, it was roughly 4 years. And it was in 2020 that my old man passed away. So he battled that cancer for a long time. It was horrible because his face had dropped down. He never stopped working. He just kept wiener breaking, whether he was a brunette, and then he went to Newcastle Walkers, and by the end of it, he was probably 65 kilo. And this was the man who was 105 kilo, big, strong, fit man, and by then, when he actually died, there was nothing left of him. It was just bones. And I always thought nothing. I always had this thing in my head, it can't get any worse, something would happen. So his face had dropped down. Eventually they'd done some plastic surgery to fix his mouth up. So instead of having the big droop, so picked his mouth back up, and they were going to try and fix his eye because he couldn't shut his eye, and he's getting all this dust from working cattle in his eye and whatnot. So eventually they just sewed his eye shut, which is horrible. So he had his eye sewed shut like that. And I was like, it can't get any worse, and eventually he just started losing more and more weight. And eventually the cancer had spread down and got into his throat and took his voice. So he could only talk in a very raspy whisper. So my dad had some really good mates that he loved talking to on the phone, and, some great mates he'd talk for an hour and a half to, and when that happened, he lost all that. His mates couldn't understand. He was horrible. They couldn't even understand what he was saying. And for a man that, just was so loyal to his mates and not even being able to talk to them, that was hard on him. I can only imagine, but really hard on me too, and even us boys, I talked to them, and we got good at deciphering what he was saying, but it was still extremely hard. You talk in whispers, and that was rough, eh? And same thing, I can't get any worse. And
how'd you go? When with that mentality of it can't get any worse. And then these little things, and you're seeing your old man like
slowly fade away. It was really hard. But I just kept putting walls up, in my head. That I guess I never considered him dying, because he was just such a hard man, and I just had so much respect for him, So I never seen him. I just always thought, he's never going to die, which is just so stupid, There was nothing. He had radiation. He had chemo. He was, remember him going to work and he was doing that chemo and he'd just be spewing, like trying to saddle his horse and whatnot. Like no power left to even get his saddle on. He had a system to where he'd have the step ladder and do all this stuff to get his saddle on. And once he was on a horse, it was like he had all his power back, because I'd love to show you this photo of him just before he died in Newcastle and his favourite mare, which I've actually got now, Sugar Shaker. It's this amazing photo and he's just, the old man's just skin and bone with his old hat on there and he's just got a mob of wieners filtering through this gate, and it's like, when he was on that horse, he had all his power back. He could do anything. He was an amazing horseman, like bloody, just really talented. So yeah, it was tricky. I just kept putting walls up, and I never thought he was going to die, And when he did die, I'll tell you about that too. It was the start of 2020, February 2020. Anyway, so the cancer had gone into his throat and whatnot, and he was actually at Richmond. He'd finished the 2019 season, and I'd actually ripped up. I was flying. He rang me and said, I've got to get down. I've got to get down to bloody back down there. And, I've got all these horses on and whatnot. And I said, well, I'll come give you a hand, man. I'll help you drive back or whatever. And I hadn't seen him for 8 months or something, and had no idea how bad it had got. And so I caught a lift with a mate back to Catherine, and met the old man in his truck the next day, and he got out of the truck and there was nothing left. Like he was 70 kilo, like just in that year the cancer had just taken so much weight off him, like bloody, there was nothing left of him. And it was just a huge shock, and even giving the old man a hug, just like it was crazy, And I was like, yeah, thank God I come to help him, drive these horses back. And because he was just so out of it too, like in his head, he was just bloody, just so unwell. So yeah, we drove back down and stayed at our mate's, picked his car up from, he had a little car, picked it up from Newcastle Waters, and then I took the truck and horses ahead of him, and he followed me out home at his own pace pretty steadily. I got back to Richmond, dropped all his horses off at our friends, the Fords, and done all that, got him all organised, and then that was his last year, that was his year done, and he was so crook. I'm trying to remember if he was what treatment he was getting then, but he was going to the hospital for something. He must have been doing a bit of chemo still or something then. Anyway, so yeah, the cancer had gone into his throat. January, I spent a little bit of time with him, and then February, seen him a little bit, and it was like getting very close. Like you could tell he was just starting to, I wouldn't say give up, but it was just getting too hard, In pain, he just ate pain medicine. If he didn't have Panadol every 2 hours, and he meant to do all this stuff in 4-hour things, but if he let it get too far, he'd spend a day and a half trying to catch up on pain meds to get back in the cycle. He had to have alarms set on his phone at night to get up and take pain meds. Otherwise, the pain was just too much through his face, just extreme, like aching and burning, I think, just terrible. So yeah, I had this trip to Japan planned with some mates to go snowboarding over there. And I'd seen him, he got real crook, had a bit of a scare, so I ripped up to Richmond, seen him just before I went. And all of us boys did, us 3 brothers, seen him there and spent a bit of time with him, and he had got out of hospital and he was feeling okay. And I was like, he's all right. And I was going to Japan for 10 days. So I went back to my mate's place and we were getting organised, about to leave. And then Jono rang me, a middle brother, and said, the old man's can't swallow. He's having a heap of trouble swallowing, can't eat. So he'd gone to the Richmond hospital and they said, listen, the cancer's all through your throat. Like, we can feed you through a tube. And my old man, being the proud man he's like, bugger that, I'm not being fed through a tube. So he said, well, I'll just die. And so he just bloody checked himself in the hospital. Jono spent most of that time with him, which is amazing. And I messaged him. I said, I'll come back, old man. He's like, nah, mate, go to Japan. Don't worry about me. I'll be right. And I sort of regret not being there. I would have loved to have been there, because it was it was definitely hard. So he starved himself. I think I was like 15 days.
Far out. He's a fighter.
Yeah, hard to talk about. Basically, battle it. And he made his 73rd birthday, I think, was like on Valentine's Day. No, he was on the 11th of February. Made his birthday and wouldn't take any pain meds. John, I reckon, like they kept offering, oh, we'll put you on morphine, you're just zone out. And he's like, no, I want to make me birthday. Made his birthday, and then the pain was so much because he was starving and so thirsty, wasn't allowed water or anything. They put him on morphine and whatnot, and he was just like a zombie then, and then died on Valentine's Day. Yeah. In February, which is a good reminder. Every Valentine's Day comes around. I'm like, oh, it's the old man's thing, so it makes me remember that. And, I'm just that proud that, what a fighter, to battle for that long. So that all happened while I was in Japan, I think it was, he died while I was over there. And it was hard being over there with my mates, and I was having a bunch of fun, but it's just playing on my mind. I was just thinking about that and not being able to talk to him. And he sent me this big message that I've got still, and just like, bloody, when you have kids, don't try and change who they are, and you just hope that they take the best out of you and all this stuff. And it was really cool, to have that message. And then he's like, I got to go, mate. And that's what he meant. Like, I'm dying or whatever. Got to clear my throat, eh?
You're right, mate. It's incredible. That's an incredible message to get.
Yeah, it was, eh? Yeah, it was just so cool. And I sent him one back and I said, listen, old man, I'm lost. I've been flying for a few years now, and I just don't know what I want to do and whatnot. And he said, mate, it'll all come. Just, buddy, just keep going forward, and chasing whatever you want to chase. And then that was it. Didn't talk to him, didn't hear from him again, and that's when he was just, he was fading out or whatever, and didn't even have the strength to reply. So that was rough. And I was talking to Jono the whole way through it, and poor old Jono, he's the only one there, which was rough. I feel bad for him having to go through all that. Anyway, don't know where my voice is going. I'm right now. I just can't.
No, you're right, mate. It's you're absolutely fine.
Yeah. So sorry. So we moved. Come back. We had the old man's wake. Got him cremated. And his wake was amazing. Just had a big slide of his life. All the steps through his life as a cut in Australia and bronc rider and all the things he had done and meeting mum and the things they had achieved. And it was cool, and some of his best old mates come, and some of, like, my brother and my mates came as well, which meant a lot, like supporting us. And it was good to look back on his life. And I guess that year I battled, I just always take things on my own, which a lot of men do, just like, bloody, I'll get through this on my own. And I definitely got really depressed, like, bloody really down. And I just kept working, like I just wanted to work. Like that's all I wanted to do. I didn't want to go to any events or see anyone. I was just really buried myself into work. And it was good, Barclay Helicopters kept me pretty busy. And when I wasn't doing flying for them, I was trying to break in a few horses or ride a few of my own horses and stuff like that. And I was based up at Gregory Downs at that stage on a Paraway place. And it was unreal. I had all my own space on the outstation, and yeah, that sort of got me through it, I guess. And after that year, I just started wanting to do my own thing. I'm always working for other people, making other people money, and I really wanted to get back into the territory and see a lot of that. So that sort of shifted me into going on an ABN, which opened a lot of doors for me, as in I could go and fly for my good mate. Like I ended up at Tennant Creek flying for Jack Ford, one of my good mates, and got to see a lot of that Alice Springs country in the desert. It's just beautiful down there. And even over like Roma in June, fly for a lady there, PJ Knight, and get to see all that amazing country around the Carnarvon Gorge there. And then the main people I'd done a bit for was the Fisher family, which is that I was talking about, Alan and Dad being really good mates and doing all that coaching muster and whatnot. And they had a few places back up there, and their game was mainly buffalo. They had cattle as well, but yeah, they'd made all their money sort of through bathrow and catching feral buffalo. And old Alan was just a legend up there, just had it down to a fine art. So I done my time with old Jack. I done a bit of first round with Jack at Tennant Creek, and then went up to Normie and those guys to sort of finish most of the year off with them, which was unreal, eh? Like just, I'd already done a little stint with them when I was at Barclay. I'd gone and done wet season with Norm and collected croc eggs and done all that, which I'll talk about further as we go on, and done a bit of buffalo stuff. But yeah, I went up there this time and it was just solid on it, eh? Like we we're always you've done a lot of coach yards. You'd set up yards and coach them all into the yards, and have a team of catchers on the ground and get them into the trap yards and stuff like that. And then other days, like when we went out to a place called Remingini in Almond Land there, and it was a big contract that Normie had snagged, and basically you'd pay all the Aboriginal fellas out there royalties to go and catch all them buffalo in all the different areas out there. And you'd first thing in the morning you'd have to go out there onto the floodplain because all those old buffalo had been shot at and chased for killers, to get meat and whatnot. So buffalo are so intelligent. They'd know if they went out there at night, they were safe. They could feed out on all the floodplain and eat all that feed. And then come daylight, they'd got to be heading back in and get into the timberline. And they were safe, and there was that thick in there. They couldn't get shot at or whatever. And so, we'd have to be there. The crew would get up super early, go out there and be waiting on the edge of the floodplain. And then us chopper fellas would get up and basically just run all the bulls into those boys. All those old bulls would be coming back in. You'd have big mobs of cows and calves coming in too, filtering back into the timber. But you'd see all these old lone bulls, and they're just big, cheeky fellas, and they'd just be marching back in. We'd go really hard for sort of 2 or 3 hours, catch everything that we could catch coming back in for that morning. And the boys would just catch them in their catches and head rope them to trees. And then once we're finished catching old land, and we'd go around and pick all them fellas up and put them on all the load trucks, take them back to the mother yard, put them on water and hay, and just keep it doing that until we had enough for truckloads to get them back to Darwin and put them in spelling yards there to go on the boats like overseas. So that was unreal. Like buffalo, like Normie Fisher, like the things he knew about buffalo was next level, and how to work them, how they think and operate. Like they're extremely intelligent. They're nothing like cattle. You can't manipulate them and bend them as much as cattle. Like you let them, if you're on the blade of one, doesn't matter if you're in a catcher or a chopper, and you're trying to bend one way, if you go a little bit too far past his nose and let him duck behind you, you let that happen once, then that fella knows. Like they'll just do it again and again, and they'll wait for you. You'll be trying to get them to bend around, and then they'll just stop on a dime like a horse and just go straight in behind you. They're so intelligent and strong, like bloody just an amazing animal, eh? The fishers were experts at that. And then the Croc game, Normie had seen an opportunity. I'm not sure when he first started getting eggs. Been doing a long time collecting Croc eggs, and the industry's getting really big now. And basically it entailed, Norm would have all these little lease country that he was allowed, and that was his area to go and collect, whether it was, he had a few different places, but I remember going out Pepinati way, like to the west of Darwin, around the floodplains there, and then he had country back around to the east too. And you'd go out, there was 3 ways of getting the eggs. You could either get slung in a harness and whatnot with an esky and a bamboo pole, and that was for like real thick country, like the real thick paperbark country, and it was all swamps. And you go around and find all the nests first, so you'd know, righto, there's 3 in that area. If I sling you in here, you'll be able to get them 3. Then I'll pick you up and get a new esky, go to the next one. So you'd sling in your harness, It was proper cool. Normally you'd sort of put you, I don't know, you might be 5 meters from the nest. Sometimes you'd have to go right onto the nest, but you'd always try and spot the female or get an idea of where you could work your way in and work out where the female was, because it's just so dangerous. You got to be onto it, So we'd sneak our way in there. We'd be able to see the nest when we got dropped in. Sometimes you're on the own. Sometimes you'd have 2 of you. There's always better having 2, like one fella to watch and the other fella to collect eggs and mark them. So that's with the harness. The other way was in a cage. The cage, I was never a fan of the cage on the floating mats. You'd get slung out. Normally it'd sling you in the aluminium cage or whatever it was. There was a few different ones we had, and drop you on top of the nest on a floating mat. And floating mat's all that big swamp country which is really deep, but it grows that grass mat, and the females would rip that mat up and build a little dome nest. And he'd plonk you down on that nest, and you'd put all your weight on it and whatnot and see if it was going to break through and sink. And normally they were right. So normally he would unhook you, and because it'd take you sort of 10, 15 minutes to get the egg. So he'd unhook you and go and land, and you'd have a 2-way.
Oh my God.
And you just dead silence, and it's just, there's all water there. I've got some photos I should show you. All water, and then there's swamp, and the females would normally, hopefully they would come up when you first got there, and they'll grab the cage and shake the cage, and you'd have your bamboo and you'd tap them off.
How big's this cage around you?
It's probably like, I'd say 1 metre by metre, but
so they're like right there?
Yeah, right there. Yeah, it's got to be really light. You keep it as light as you can, because you don't want too much weight. So, you'd bluff that female off. Females are sort of, all they're trying to do is protect their nest. They're not trying to eat you. They're just trying to, you're stealing my eggs. So you bluff her off, chase her away, hopefully. normally it'd unhook you, and then you'd just sit there and you'd get the Megs, and you're just a sitting duck, it's dead silent. You can just hear like water popping and like fish popping, swimming, like crocs swimming around us. That was my least favourite. I hated doing the cage stuff. And then the other way is my favourite was when you like get around a little 22 and you could actually go land near that nest and walk in, shut your machine down or just walk into that nest. And that's the one you want to be doing. Like you're on foot or you're only in sort of shallow water and whatnot. You've got a bit of manoeuvrability and you can really take your time to assess where they are. And big males, if you run into big males, especially in that breeding season, they're really hungry because they've just come, like finally the wet season, they got all this water to hunt in. They're the ones like if you've seen a male, you just had to either put it down or get the hell away from it because it's just so dangerous. They're just like the males that are around like that 13, 14 foot, they're big, like pretty big, but they're not huge. The big fellas are sort of more shy and being shot at over the years or whatever it was. But yeah, them mediocre fellas were still really fast on the ground or in the water and just extremely territorial and savage, and hungry. So they're the ones you had to stay away from in that croc game. And same thing like I was talking about, like Normie was just a bushman, he just knew cattle, buffalo and crocs, and all he'd done is fly since he was a young fella and amazing man. Normie end up crashing the machine there I want to say it was October last year, just after I'd left with them out at Remo. They were nearly finished. They had just about to finish packing up there. And then, he put that machine down and crashed and died. So it's buddy, really rough on their family and his two boys, Nathan and Josh, amazing young fellas, so proud of what they're doing. They've taken on everything that Normie was doing. And Josh, he'd be 20 and he's flying and he got a heap of time in with Norm. Norm trained him up and then Nath was just this freak with a catcher and catching buffalo on that, Like you just literally run a bull out. Then boys would have it within seconds, just by knowing where to position themselves and read them, It's just that they're elite level, and they're so young. So I'm looking forward to see what they're going to do. They've got an amazing future out of them.
As I sit here and think back on what Clancy's kind of just shared in the last hour, it is an incredible, incredible story. It definitely has been really emotional and something which I think in the days since I've made sure that I actually sat with, and I'm really looking forward to making sure that I spend the time listening back to this one, because I think Clancy's story and journey is just remarkable. I think there's so much inspiration in it. So this episode's been broken up into 2 parts. That's part 1. Join us next week for part 2 of Clancy Mackay. See ya.